colleges they're really interested in. And that's something that's really important to us because it's a way of really demonstrating serious interest without having to commit to an early decision application. So that's something that we're paying attention to. We see so many applicants from certain parts of the world, and so many of those applications can look similar on paper. And when we really delve into the interviews, when we start to hear the differences, the interview is absolutely worth it. We are not looking for perfection, but this is the way we get to know you. And so applications without an interview are really just less exciting than if we get to see you in person and hear you talking.
I think one of the wonderful things about Initial View is that it is a way to add personality to your application. Your application is flat, right? It is the pieces that have made up part of your journey through high school and just part of your journey. It's never all of who you are. But your interview gives us insight into how you think about the world and the passion that you have for the change that you want to make, right? Or the drive that you have to learn something new, or the fact that you don't know any of that yet. All of that comes through when you really get to have a conversation with someone.
My colleague Annie Sullivan and I really rely on Initial View a lot with the applications in which students have submitted a video. It's just such a great tool to make an application that's two-dimensional until we watch the video really come alive. And what we're looking for is, we're looking for a little bit of spontaneity. The Initial View interviewers ask some questions that you might expect, but they also ask questions that you probably wouldn't expect and that the students couldn't necessarily prepare for. And so we want to see how the students think on their feet. We want to see if they get flustered when something happens that they didn't expect, or whether they can adapt. And the students who are going to be most successful are the ones who don't get too rattled when something unexpected comes their way.
In terms of what we're looking to identify in the interview, we want to get a sense for what are you like? What are your quirks? What are your interests? What are the things that you care about and you're passionate about? And sometimes that doesn't come through in the application. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for you to just be yourself. We really spend a lot of time looking to see whether or not you seem authentic, and whether you're showing us your real self. And those are very kind of real things for the admissions officer. We finally get to connect with a student who otherwise was just kind of a piece of paper.
One time within an interview, Initial View really helped us dive into a student that on paper had really common interests for our applicant pool, but through the interview, we really understood why she was so interested in psychology, why she got excited about how the brain worked and the connections, and how that also tied into her cultural heritage. And it really helped us see beyond just that she was a student who was applying to one of our most popular majors, but really what made her excited about that and what she would add to our community.
We are very much building a community when we are reviewing applications. And so we do absolutely have conversations about is the student going to be a good roommate? What is the student going to be like in the classroom? Is this the type of student who's going to seek out professors because they're simply interested in what they're doing? Initial View enables us to really get to know the student in a wonderful and unique way. And frankly, it's a great way for students to make their application stand out.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to Tuesday Talks. We're so glad you're here. And I know that there are a couple other streaming places that we're streaming. And so I am just double checking with my colleagues that we are clear and live on other platforms. If you need another platform, we do have Chinese support on 小儿通. So if I put it in the chat, so if you didn't open your chat box yet, open your chat box. If you need a link for 小儿通, go ahead and open the chat box for that. We are streaming on YouTube, and I will be having a Korean colleague there as well to support in Korean language this evening. So if you need that, go ahead and open up your chat. I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us. I know that for some of you, summer vacation has begun, and so I'm glad that you're still spending summer with us. And we will probably, may or may not, but you should always be prepared, play Spot Mr. View. So if you have never played that before, what it means is that you need to open your Zoom windows, your speaker views, make sure you have it on gallery view. And my guests are here. So Maria and John, if you guys want to go ahead and open up your cameras as well so people can kind of set up their gallery views, that would be awesome. Hi, welcome. Yes, so if you've never played before, basically Mr. View, someone kind of maybe in costume, maybe not, will be coming into one of our windows and showing up. And so if you see him, you need to screenshot it and then send an email to contact@initialview.com and you will win a prize. So, so always be prepared. We also, I already said this, but just in case you need to scan the QR code, if that's easier than finding it on chat, here you go. And finally, I want to thank our sponsor schools once again. We could not be doing Tuesday Talks week after week after week without all of you telling your friends and family and students and counselors about this. So please do, you know, thank your counselors if your school name is on here. If it's not, email me. We would love to have your school be on this list. Fantastic. Well, without further ado, we're gonna start talking. I want to say a special thank you to my guests today because they are both in California. And I don't know if you guys know what time it is in California right now. It is 5 a.m. in California, which means that they were up at 4:30 or before, making sure that they were ready for this talk. So special thank you for waking up early and spending time with us. So before we dive into our chat questions and our poll, I'm going to have us be able to see your faces very clearly. And Maria and John, if you don't mind introducing yourself real briefly and tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about your institution. So Maria, do you want to start us off?
Yes, sounds good. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you for having us, and we're happy to get up at 5 a.m. My name is Maria Carvalho, and I'm one of the international admission officers at the University of Southern California. So I work primarily with international students, and University of Southern California is considered a large private research university. We're located right in the center of Los Angeles. As you can see with my background, you get a little bit of everything. So we have programs in all of the disciplines, all different areas. You will be on an actual campus right in the center of LA, like I mentioned, so you have access to everything close by. So that's just a little bit about USC.
Thank you. And John.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, whatever it happens to be. It's pretty early here, right? 5 a.m. Happy to be here, though. My name is John Heward. I'm the Assistant Director for International Admissions at UC San Diego. Been here about 8 years. Been doing international admissions a lot longer than that, though. I've previously at a private institution in the Midwest where I did graduate international admissions, undergraduate international admissions. I also spent 2 years as a college counselor at a school in Shanghai, and then I figured I moved all the way to Shanghai. I could at least move from the Midwest to the West Coast of the U.S. and landed in San Diego. I love it here at UC San Diego, and looking forward to talking to everybody tonight.
Wonderful. And again, my name is Gloria Cho Crawford. I am one of the co-founders of Initial View, host of Tuesday Talks. It's great to see you all. And welcome again. So last week, if you were here with us, we talked about essays, and we primarily focused on the one big essay that you might need to write, whether that be on a Common App or a coalition or maybe even a school's specific application, the one main longer words essay. And today we're going to talk a little bit about all the other writing that happens on your application. And as we always say, there are many institutions in the US. And while most of the institutions in the US do follow a holistic review process, how it looks might look a little different for each institution. I invited two very different institutions to talk about this today. What they have to say is specific to their institution, can somewhat be applied to lots of other schools in terms of reflection, brainstorming, and things. But we will need you to do the hard research. We're just helping you start the research by understanding some of the things. So I'll start by saying that. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a poll up here because I am always curious to see who's here, because that might inform a little bit about how we start our discussion. So you all should see a poll. And this is a reminder for you because, as is always the case in Tuesday Talks, I want people to be involved. So if you didn't open your chat box already, you better open your chat box. And if you see that poll, go ahead and start taking the poll. I see that about half of us are participating, so that's awesome. And I don't know if the other streaming sections, if you don't have the poll, go ahead and type into the chat where you are in this process. Who are you? Are you applying to college this coming fall? Are you applying to college for a future year? Are you a parent, counselor, teacher? Go ahead and answer. And I'm loving this, that it looks like more than half of the people here are applying to college soon. And so that's exciting. And so this topic is pretty relevant to you today. Let's give it like 2 more seconds. Anybody else want to participate in the poll? All right, yay, awesome. Okay, so more than half of you are applying to college soon, which means that you've already been starting to think about what you're going to write for your essays. And so I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to start with a chat question as we have been often. And here we go. All right, what comes to your mind when you hear the words supplemental or additional? Go ahead and start typing in the chat. It always takes about a minute or two before the first brave soul. Oh no, we have brave souls already. Great. Okay, college specific. Why school or why major? Great. People know what the supplement is. But think a little broadly too. What do you think of when you hear the words supplemental or additional? Extra things, great. Additional information, great. Optional, not necessary, okay. Questions about yourself, any additional short answer questions that are to be answers for specific colleges, extra, more ways to let colleges know about you, fit between school and student, essay specific to each university, extra, optional, more details, must do for better results. More details about you, an opportunity to show more perspectives of yourself over and above what's required. Supplemental is to enrich, great. Additional, important but not covered by essay, highlights, not enough word count. That's funny. These are great thoughts. That what comes to your mind. I love it. And I love that a lot of you are realizing it's more details, more things that you can show in the context of admissions. Obviously the word supplemental or additional, I like that some of you just talked about the words generally. Okay, the second chat question I have is, what are some key things that you would hope admissions officers learn about you through your application? And we've talked about this a lot in multiple Tuesday Talks, but just generally, what are the key things that you yourself, not what other people are telling you, you yourself want admissions officers to learn about you through your application? Okay. Yep, go ahead and start typing. Great. Personality, my uniqueness, my well-roundedness, and my soft skills, my leadership, my communication, my values, what I can bring to the campus, what my dreams are, how I challenge myself, my shining points, my interests and passions, the progress I've made about interests other than my major, like my major interests, extracurriculars, my talent, my future plans. I want the admissions officers to learn about my involvement in the community, not just my grades or GPA, but my soft skills, personality, personal touch. These are great. These are great. And these are the things, well, and I'm just going to dive right into questions for Maria and John. Like, what are some of the things that you want to learn? Did these answers on the chat, did they resonate with you? What are some things that you're looking to learn about students? I think sometimes people think it's like a, formulaic thing where you're like, check box, check box, check box. But when you think about what you are hoping to learn, what are you hoping to learn?
I think for me, when I'm reading applications, and you see, we use the personal insight questions, which is a little different than essays or supplements. It's like Gloria said, it's not check boxes at all. A lot of people, they'll ask me, oh, what is it you're looking for? What's that one thing you need? And I've had students at college fairs ask me that. And one student just, there has to be something you're looking for. And then after about 10 times of telling me, trying to find out what exactly it was, I said, okay, it's basketball. And he's like, what? I'm like, it has to be basketball. He's like, that's crazy. I'm like, well, yeah, right. It is. I said, we're not looking for anything specific. I'm just waiting for you to tell me what's important to you. What are the things maybe I see from your activities and things you've been involved in, a few things, maybe gravitated towards a handful of them. And maybe I'm looking for something that tells me why have some of these things become important to you? Why are they central to who you are? And what is it maybe that you're going to do with those in the future? Or how's that going to bring something into our campus? Maybe not, so much writing it, oh, I'm going to do X, Y, Z on your campus, but the story that I understand from that story, why those things are important to you, and how they've sort of shaped you into the person you are today.
Yeah. Maria, did you have something to add?
Yes, I would definitely agree with John. I don't have check boxes either. And at USC, similar to what John was talking about, we definitely want to just know about you. This is your application, your essays, your supplementals. We want to make sure we just get to know you more through them. But for USC, because we do ask you why you want to come to USC, we want to see more of that specific information to USC and how you connect with USC. So that's one of the things we look for as well.
Yeah, so let me take a step back and let's talk specifically about these two types of, and I'm not even going to call them essay, because I feel like essay elicits some kind of different feeling than what you all are looking for. So short answer, other area to write things. Let's define what we're talking about: supplemental essay and PIQ. So let's start with USC. Let's start with Maria. Tell us, like, what are supplemental essays, and for USC's context, how many are we talking, and what are the word limits? Somebody put in like not enough words, right? Yeah, so let's start with that.
Okay. Yeah, so as you learned last week, I think, that you will have to complete a common essay, common application piece. That's a personal statement, and that's going to go to all the schools that you applied to through the common application. And then in addition to that, for USC, you will need to complete 2 more short answers. They will be, the first one, you will have to choose between a couple different options. For example, tell us more about yourself, or tell us about an interest that you have. And then the second one is a required one, and that will be why USC. So that was just one of the responses in the chat, is why our school. And then some programs and some schools that you're applying to may have additional questions or short answers that you have to complete. So that may be the case for our engineering school or our liberal arts school. So you may have additional ones, but you will at very least have 2 additional responses or short answers to complete. And those short answers are actually short answers. So they're about 200, 250 words. So they're going to be about a paragraph long, a couple paragraphs. So not as intense as the personal statement, but you should spend just as much time on them because they are much more specific to us.
And then UC is obviously very different. There's something called personal insight questions that would be the equivalent, quote unquote. And often you'll hear, if you go to any of the UC sessions, you'll hear PIQs. So if you are like, what is a PIQ, personal insight question? But maybe John, you could tell us what exactly the personal insight question is, how many they're supposed to choose, what's the word count for that?
Yeah, so the UC system, we're very different. We're not on the Common App. We sort of have our own Common App where you apply to the UC system, and you can select any one of 9 of our undergraduate campuses, or all of them if you like. So we don't really have the one big main essay. We have these personal insight questions, and there are 8 of those personal insight questions, and you can choose 4 of those. You would choose the ones that, similar to what I was talking about earlier, that kind of fit your background, fit your experiences, the things that maybe speak to you. One student might look at one personal insight question and say, I have no idea where to start with that one. And another student might look at it and say, wow, that's been my whole life. I can talk about this for much longer than the 350 words you get. So I saw somebody put in the chat earlier that not enough words, and you're going to love the PIQs because you only get 350 words, right? So you have to be able to get to the point, make a point quickly, succinctly. So again, there's 8 that you can choose from. You have to answer 4 of them. They're much shorter. They're not an essay. I know we've talked about this before, but I'm not going to take a red pen to it and mark miscommas and things like that. Again, we're really just looking to get that story out of you, because in the UC system, we don't take letters of recommendation. We don't do interviews. So it's really our one chance to get to know you. And quite frankly, we'd rather hear that from you than from anybody else, to tell you the truth. So, and as far as if you're thinking true supplements, we really don't have those in the UC system. Some campuses may have an oddball thing or two, like for us, if you're applying to one of our fine arts majors or something like that, you would have the opportunity to submit a portfolio, something like that. But as far as additional writing, it's just those 4 PIQs.
Wonderful. So I like that you said you don't take a red pen to it. I think there are a lot of, in this audience specifically, there are a lot of students who didn't grow up in the US education system. They have not been writing in the same way that an American student might have been. We talked about this last week, but there is some concern about writing ability and technique, I guess, technical problems and how that might impact your read. And so I just wanted to ask a little bit about strategies. I like that you said you didn't use a red pen. But I know that there is a way to be compelling and there's a way to not be compelling. So let's start with some good strategies to how to approach these. Do you have any recommendations on how to start? I think a lot of people are they just get stuck on a question and they just sit there for a long time. Do you have thoughts on how to kind of begin the process of these additional questions?
I can jump in here. My suggestion would be to start brainstorming early, and brainstorming in multiple ways. So you can brainstorm by free writing, just taking the question and just writing whatever comes to mind. Or if you're a visual person like me, I like to draw charts and just random words and places. And then also brainstorming with each other or talking through it with somebody. I think just starting to verbalize it, whether it's on paper or vocally, can really help you in starting to see like which questions you may connect with. For us, there's only a couple to choose from, but for example, with the UC system, if you have 8 to choose from, you'll have to kind of see which ones you'll be able to put your best foot forward with. So I think brainstorming is definitely the first step, and start that early, not a week before, not a month before, but now, like in your summer or in your junior year, or second to last year, where you can have that time to reflect and have that time to converse with other people and get different ideas, and then start moving from there. So to give yourself some time to do the pre-work before you actually get started.
Well, I guess that brings me to a question like, do the questions change and each year, and when do the new questions come out? Are people able to see them now, or do they have to wait till July 1st, or when do people see them?
For USC, the questions may change slightly, but generally they're going to be the same. And the new questions, if there are any, will be out when our application opens in August 1st.
Okay. And for UC?
Yeah, ours haven't really changed for the last, since we went to this format of 8 PIQs and choosing 4. We really haven't changed those questions since then. I know we had a work group looking at changing maybe the wording of them, not the idea of them, but maybe to make them a little more understandable, relevant to, as classes go by and kind of generations change, like how will it sound to a student? Is it going to connect to them? So not really changing the content of the question, but maybe wordsmithing a little more so it reads a little better for students. So yeah, they haven't really changed, and I wouldn't expect them to, but there would be, plenty of advanced warning on the UC website, the main UC website, year or two in advance before we would ever change something like that.
Got it. Great. John, did you have a strategy to share?
Yeah,
that's how to start.
Yeah, I got off track on that one a little bit with the. Yeah, Maria's right. Start early, brainstorm a lot, throw ideas out there, and particularly, with these PIQs, I think an important thing for students is, when you have some rough drafts or things like that ready, is when you start to have people proofread them, again, much like I'm not going to take a red pen to it. Don't, your English teacher might not be the best person for it. You want it to be people who know you and who can tell you, does this sound like you? Keep a list of your accomplishments, the things you've been involved in as you're moving through your years in school. Have that available, sort of like the brag sheet that you might make for your counselor, something like that, of your accomplishments and things like that. Keep it for yourself too, about the things you've been involved in and what's been important to you to start to get some ideas. When I was a counselor, yeah, Maria's exactly right. I'd start early, I always wanted some kind of ideas given to me before they left for that summer break before their final year. Obviously things might happen over the summer that change what you write about, but to have some direction of where you might be going with them. Study those personal insight questions, think about them, get to those early, maybe in your junior year, think about them all year long. Which ones do I connect with? And have it. So again, Maria's exactly right. Start early. And when you're proofreading these things, have somebody that read it that knows you, to be sure it sounds like it's you coming through.
Yeah, for some of our younger students who, are wanting to get a head start here, there's a question here saying, how can I see the questions if I don't have a Common App yet, or the UC app hasn't opened? How, if they're in 10th grade, for example, and they want to get a head start of knowing what the questions are, what would your suggestion be?
For USC, they can start a application in Common Application, just don't submit it. So you can start it and keep going. So it's like a practice and then don't submit it until you're of the age or of the year that you need to.
I would say actually the same thing is true in the UC system. I have an application I've had open ever since I got here. It's been 8 some years. I never submitted it. Now the application is it's only open certain times a year. Most UC campuses are fall admission only. There may be one or two that might do a spring admission, but you can get in it and see it. The personal insight questions themselves, they're posted on the UC website. They're posted on our admission site. So the link I've given, it'll be probably at the end of this presentation about where you can find all of our resources. All of our publications are there, and there's one specifically on the PIQs there, and it has all 8 of them listed.
Yeah, yeah. But I like what y'all were talking about is like, even without questions, basically, you can start brainstorming. That brag sheet is really a great idea that I have a freshman and a sophomore myself, and I'm like, you guys start making a list of things you're proud of, things that make you tick, things that make you excited, start making that list. So that's great. So any other strategies, like let's say for the people that are, about, or they're hitting their summer vacation, and John, you just made it, I mentioned when you were a counselor, before summer of their senior year, you were like, give me something. What is that something that you would hope to see when you were a counselor that you think, was helpful before they came back in the fall?
For me, the biggest thing was just to see that they were starting to think about it, and it didn't have to be anything perfected, like, oh, here's my essay, and all I have to do is, like I said, I don't want them, but to get the commas in the right place and everything. I just ideas down, even a rough draft, a few paragraphs about what you're going to write about, things that you may have taken from your sort of brag sheet and distilled into, wow, this is something I can really take somewhere and make a really good story about myself that can really show who I am. So for me, it was just that to make sure that the students had really started thinking about this and what direction they may want to go with them. Certainly nothing in any sort of final format.
Great. Well, so we mentioned, Maria, you mentioned the why USC, or like not, and let's, move beyond USC. Other schools are going to say why school. And sometimes why school comes about very directly, like why, but then sometimes the why essay might not actually say why. It might say something else, like, what do you want to study at our school, right? Can you go a little bit more deeply into like when we say why school, what could that look like? And what is a compelling why school supplement?
Yes. And as I was reading our question, I had the same thought. I was like, our question doesn't actually say why, but our interpretation of it is why. So it will be varied forms of the why question. So we want to make sure that you have done your research and that you understand what USC has to offer and how you will fit into what USC has to offer. And I know other schools are also asking a similar question. I can't speak to what exactly they're looking for, but likely they're looking for the same kind of fit idea and making sure that you understand what kind of a school it is. And it's a two-way street. We want to understand what kind of a student you are, and you should understand what kind of a school we are as well. And that goes beyond the rankings, the location, things like that. We really want you to understand our identity, just as we want to understand your identity. So for us, that means not just looking at our website and taking the words that we put on our website and rearranging them and then putting them into your supplemental. We want you to, look at some of our student clubs and organizations, see what they're doing, see if that maybe aligns with something that you're doing, look at our academic programs, see what you're excited about, see if there are professors you're connecting with, things like that. We want you to go beyond what's available on the website. So attending things like this, attending our own information sessions, those are helpful. And one thing we always say within our group is we don't want to be able to just replace USC with another college's name when you write something. So if you can replace UC San Diego and USC, then you haven't done enough research. Like that's not going deep enough for us. So again, we want to make sure that you understand what we offer. And for me as an advisor or a counselor personally, especially for international students, I would hate for a student to come all the way to USC and not take advantage of everything that we have to offer, because that's a lot of space, you're traveling very far to do that. You're spending a lot of money. I want you to take advantage of all the great things we have to offer. And so that's what I'm looking for in those, is that students are going to be motivated. They want to take advantage of those things, and they know they're starting to brainstorm how they're going to do that. Of course, things will change. That's fine, but we want you to be thinking about and getting excited about that. So that's the why question for me.
Yeah, and so specifically, like if a school is asking you to, say, tell me what you want to pursue academically at our school, almost every institution in the US probably has biology, for example. And so that is not very specific. So if you wanted to study biology, there would be like, what would be compelling if somebody wanted to study biology or a specific major at your school? Like, what would you hope to see?
Yeah,
like you said, you don't want it to be like, well, yeah, great, you can study biology here and here and here and here.
Right. Yeah, I think first students can start with, why are you interested in biology in the first place? And then going back to, okay, maybe you took it in high school, maybe you've done some volunteer work, maybe you have a family member in that field that has helped you gravitate towards that, and then take that as a jumping off point and figure out, why is it at USC? Like, what is it about the biology program at USC that you're interested in? Again, this will take some research. That's why you want to start early, but seeing what is motivating you in either direction, what got you interested, and then why do you want to keep going? Because it will be a commitment as well. So you want to make sure that you're pursuing the right area that's of interest to you. And again, this is where my earlier tip comes in play, is get others involved, because I think it's a lot to try and figure out on your own. So as John mentioned, get the people who know you, who can help you brainstorm through this. So that's your family, peers, and also your teachers and counselors, because oftentimes they can see things in you that maybe you can't see in yourself, but they can help you through that process.
Yeah, great. So John, there's a question, and we will have a lot of questions about the UC system, and I just want to give you a preview. In the fall, we are going to have a UC specific Tuesday talk that can talk a lot about some of these things as well. But specific to kind of PIQs, and in light of what we're talking about, John, with why school, for the first question is when you apply to the UCs, do you automatically apply to all 9, or do you choose specific ones? And then the follow-up question to that is there a why specific UC in the PIQ?
Yeah, these can be tricky things in the UC system, to say why a specific campus. But yeah, when you apply to the UC system, on the very first page, I think it's still laid out that way, and will be this fall. There's a map of California. It's got the location of all of our campuses, and you click on that location, and then basically that's the checkbox that says I want to apply to this campus. Again, there's 9 undergraduate campuses. There's actually a 10th UC San Francisco, but they're a graduate and professional school only. But there are 9 undergraduate campuses. You choose any or all of those 9. The key is, though, it's I believe $70 application fee for U.S. citizens and permanent residents, and $80 for international students. So that's per campus. So if you apply to all of them, then you're going to get 9 times 80. That's the only difference. But what we would like to see is students thinking about which campuses they want to apply to. But no, you're not automatically applying to all 9. We don't necessarily look and know that you're applying. I don't really have the time to see it here. You're applying to UCLA or or UC Irvine. And if I did, I probably wouldn't care. So when it comes to these PIQs, you can see the trouble. If you're applying to, say, maybe 6 of our campuses and you're writing specifically about one, then I'm not saying it completely turns me off. I'm like, oh, well, they want to go to Irvine, so I'm not even going to read this application. I don't do that. I still try and get what I can out of it. But it, it's a little more, obviously, a little more maybe difficult to get, to get the story out of that when they're talking more about another campus. There is one question. The last question talks about, outside of any of these other questions, is there anything that makes you a strong candidate for admission to the University of California? So that's a UC in general kind of thing. And that can be a little difficult to answer sometimes too, because while we're all, as far as public institutions in California, we're the research institutions, we all have that in common about us. The campuses can be very different, from Davis in the north, small college town, agricultural and veterinary science programs that most of the other campuses don't have, to us in the south, very different climate kind of thing. So, it might be a little difficult to answer a question like that without really understanding a lot about the UC system and how it's put together. The other one is, there's one question in there that focuses on your major, or your academic field of study, what you plan to study. You want to be careful about that one too, that you've researched what majors each campus that you're applying to actually offers. We offer a lot of the same majors that are similar. They might have different names, but you may be writing about a major that doesn't really exist at another campus. So make sure you've done, again, research is the key. Make sure you've sort of done your research on the system, on the majors offered by the different campuses. If the academic major is something that's really important to you and that's something you want to write about, then make sure the campuses you're applying to actually have that major, and that you're not applying to, say, philosophy at one and biology at another and writing about biology, right? So
yeah. And I mean, I think this kind of discussion and conversation kind of brings us back to what we're always talking about here on Tuesday Talks, is authenticity. Like at the end of the day, like when we're asking about strategies, when we're recommending strategies, we're not like trying to say this is how you game the system. We don't want you to go away from the Tuesday Talk thinking that. And more, I think I'm hoping that you walk away from this saying, I'm going to trust the admissions officer. I'm going to trust the admissions officer to know that they know what type of student survives and thrives and does well on their campus. And I don't need to contort myself to be like, well, on USC's website, it says this, so I must jam this into my into my academic interest. Or, at the UCs, like, they have this, I'm going to say this major because this particular campus has this major and that's my first choice. And so thus I have to say it that way. Like, I think the question that you're asking is really like, what do you really want to study? Like, what do you actually really want to study? Not what do I think that this UC thinks that I want to study, right? So I think I would like to kind of bring us back to caution against trying really hard to do the research in a way that's manipulating what you actually feel. And so this is why starting early is so great, because you can just keep asking yourself, what do I actually want to do? And then trust the admissions officer to know, like, oh, well, I have that. And that's why you should come here. So it's kind of like what we always talk about admissions, sort of like dating. Okay, so I want to dive into like common mistakes. And I'm trying to see, because people are asking questions. I love that you all are asking questions. Keep asking questions, because I want to try to fold them into our conversation. But yeah, let's talk about pitfalls and common mistakes. Like when you see a PIQ or you see a supplement, and your immediate thought is like, oh, like, do you have things that happen where you're like, no, if someone had told this student blank, this would not have happened? So what are some common mistakes, pitfalls, things to avoid?
I mentioned a couple already, so just telling us about us. When I say doing research on USC, I don't mean looking at the website and then telling us exactly what we just wrote on the website. You don't need to tell us about us. We know about us. So we want to know how you connect with us. So I think that tends to be one of the pitfalls. And then, as I mentioned, being able to interchange universities into the context, that doesn't show too much depth of research or understanding of the schools. And then I think I briefly addressed this earlier too, is a lot of students spend a lot of time on the main statement and the main response that they have to give, and then not as much time on the short answers or the supplementals. And that can really come through for us. And as I mentioned earlier, it's just as important. So make sure you're spending just as much time on it and reflection on it and getting those edits and asking people to feedback, things like that, because since it is very specific for us, we pay just as much attention, if not more, to that part of the application.
I think the biggest one for me might be when a student tries to turn it into a creative writing piece. And they're really trying to impress me, maybe with their writing ability, with their ability to write a short story kind of thing. And sometimes I read those, I'm like, wow, that's a really beautiful piece of writing, but I don't really know anything else about you at the end of it. So again, the big thing is be true to yourself. Tell us your story. Don't tell us what you think we want to hear, or try to impress us with some kind of story that's really not connected to you, that just kind of showcases your interest in being a nonfiction writer or a creative writer or whatever it happens to be. I really just I want to kind of get to know you. So to me, that's the biggest one. Then the other one would be, we've got these 8 questions. They're there for a reason, and the other one would be, make sure you answer the question, that you're addressing what the prompt is asking you. If you go off and write about something else, I'm like, okay, but really you did not tell me anything about what we were looking for in this specific question. So
yeah, one of the things that I would say is don't try to cram some writing that you've done before into the answer of the question just because you think, oh, it's kind of related, let me just cram it in. It doesn't, it's not a good look. That being said, we did say, write a lot, free write and brainstorm. But don't just take one of those things you wrote in your free write and be like, oh, that's so great, and then just shove it into the the answer if it's not answering the question. You can, yeah.
Or worse yet, don't reuse one of your English class essays, something like that.
Yeah. And I do think like a lot of people come in thinking like this is my best piece of writing. But they're, that's why I was saying maybe we should just not call it an essay, because people are defining essay a certain way and then trying to replicate it on this type of writing. What about, so there was a question here, and this is an interesting thing because introverts, people often ask about introverts. And if a student is introverted, I would think that maybe writing would be easier than talking. But I think what this question is leading to is some introverts they just don't share very much, period. So what would be, do you have advice on how, well, one, I guess, bust the myth that you don't want introverts at your campus. But 2, what would be a suggestion on how to kind of bring an introvert out in a conversation? Because, Maria, you mentioned earlier about like getting people involved, getting people involved in this research process, but also kind of asking you how to reflect and thinking, for those students who have a hard time sharing anything with anyone. Any thoughts, advice on how to kind of approach this process?
Yeah, I talk a lot to students and parents about some of these things that may be hard for students to share, be they that type of thing or any sort of other thing that's going on in their life. And what I usually tell them is, I don't really, I don't know what I don't know. I can't guess into the application what might be going on. So, this is something that's a story unto itself that may be somewhat unique to this particular student. And again, it's not just things you've done in the classroom or the things, the awards you've won that you're writing about how great you are, but it's your story. What are the experiences you've had in your life? What has shaped you? How has this been a challenge for you to still go into the classroom and succeed? And what are the strategies you've used to overcome that? And how have you grown out of that? Those, again, it's a story unto itself. I think a good way to approach that might be to talk to people you trust, be it your counselor or teachers. Ask them what are the things that have stood out to them about you, and how you've kind of conducted your business, in the school. What are the challenges maybe that this has posed to you, and how you've overcome them? What is it that makes that unique to you, and how you've still thrived in the classroom despite that, things like that. But yeah, I think getting an outside perspective can be a very important thing for you. And then just to, at some point to just sit down and start in little small steps, just write a little bit here, write a little bit there, collect one thought here, one thought there, and then start to try and, put them together a little bit.
Yeah. Maria, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, a couple things. So yes, we absolutely love introverts on our campus. Don't worry, don't think that they're at a disadvantage or anything. In fact, I think it's odd that a lot of us in our field are introverts, so we still thrive. I think it was a counselor who asked that question, or a parent. I think if you know the student well, but they're not willing to share, to mention something John just said, is you can start by maybe not probing them, because that may not get them to share a little bit more, but you can start complimenting them or telling them where their strengths are, or what you've noticed them overcome, or how they reacted to something. That might be able to kind of start to get them to share a little bit more. And then another strategy that I don't know if it would work or not, but it came to mind, is maybe having the student write or brainstorm kind of in the third person, so they can kind of remove themselves from the story a little bit, and then just start to get it out. And then once they're into the process a little bit, then they can go back to making it be about them more so, and connect with them personally on that front. So
yeah,
I think it would just require some work and time. I think because introverts are generally more reflective, they will start earlier. Starting earlier will be beneficial.
Yeah, it's great advice. Last week, we also talked about this values exercise that I think can be used again, which is just, pulling words, and then just being like asking the introvert to just circle the ones, like it's not asking them to actually share a story yet, but just circle the ones that resonate with them, right? And then once you have kind of a short list of the words that resonate with them, then maybe it's like, okay, now write one sentence about why it resonates with you, or one experience, one thing you've done in your life that points to that word. Just really starting small, where they don't have to write 350 words right at the get-go, or 200 or whatever it is. So I think you should go back, and if you missed last week, the recordings on on the archives, but you can also email me and I'll send you the link for the values exercise that we did last week. And I mean, a follow-up question to this personality thing is, there is a question here, like, is there a preference for a certain personality type? A lot of people in the beginning, when I said, what is the one thing you want admissions officers to know about you, they said my personality. And so, just kind of off topic, but is there a specific type of personality that USD is looking for? Is there a certain type of personality that you see San Diego is looking for?
No, I would say no, not in particular. Just like everything else, I'm kind of when I get to these things, when I get to that part of the application, it's like opening up a book and I'm waiting to hear that story. So no, there's not any one particular type of personality we're looking for, and I think that's a good thing for those of you who may be introverts, who may be feeling like you're a small fish in your community. When you get to a college campus, it's going to be a great big community full of all kinds of different people, and wherever you end up, you're going to find your place, and you're going to find groups that you're going to connect with. So yeah, that kind of answers the question for itself. As diverse as our college campuses are in terms of types of people and not only majors they're interested in, but the personalities, the things they're into. Yeah, there's certainly not one that we're looking for.
I would echo the same. We're not looking for a specific personality either. Just someone who will enjoy being in LA and be on campus and take advantage of what's there and be able to connect with all the peers around them and faculty as well.
Yeah, and we've talked about this when we talk about holistic review and the challenge for admissions. We did those case studies and how, with each round, all of you changed your minds over and over again. And when admissions officers are reading your applications, it's not just you, it's a whole community of people that they're trying to put together. So some of that's not in your control, right? That's, in fact, a lot of it's not in your control. And so at the end of the day, you just have to be who you are and not be like, okay, well, I'm going to try to be this personality today. Because maybe that day it's just a different, that year, that day, it's a different class that's being built. And so at the end of the day, it's important to be true to yourself. So I think it's so crazy to me how quickly the hour goes by. And so we're actually running low in time. So if you still have a question and haven't asked it yet, please go ahead and put it in the chat. I am going to share, I did ask before this talk for a couple words of advice from our colleagues here. Just general advice on the application itself. So I'm gonna put these up here. But while these are up here, Maria and John, is there something like some last words of advice or kind of closing thoughts you might have for this group based on kind of questions you've seen today, but also things that have come out of our conversation, things that you want people to kind of go away with thinking about this evening, afternoon, wherever they are?
Yeah, I think you just mentioned it. Sort of, be true to yourself through this process. The counselor in me says, it's right fit for both of us, for the school and for the person. When I talk about doing your research on the UC system or individual campuses, be they our campus or be they other institutions outside the UC system, through that process, you may find, wow, I had this ideal of that place, and really now that I look at it, it might not be the place for me. So, I think that's the biggest thing is you're going to spend 4 years of your life at this place. It ought to be someplace you're going to feel comfortable, that you can picture yourself being. I think Maria kind of hinted at it earlier. You don't want to spend all this time, effort, money towards this one goal, and then you get there and you think, wow, well, if I'd really thought about this earlier, I might have. It might not be the place I want to be. So, trust the process, and that it's going to, at the end of the day, you're a place you're going to be happy at.
Yeah, similar to what everyone has said already, I think just being true to yourself and authentic and not trying to think about what we want, but more so what you want to share and what you want to provide to us to help us understand who you are. This is a very complicated process. That's why we're here to help you through it. So don't try to get too in the weeds with it, because as Gloria just mentioned, so much of it is also out of our control. So we wouldn't be able to necessarily fix any of that either. So just tell us who you are, and then also give yourself a lot of time and also lots of options. I think being flexible and giving yourself options so that you can deal with anything that may come up is a good idea as well.
It's there are comments and questions here of like just not really knowing what you want, and I think that is a hard thing. I mean, I am a lot older than all of you, and I'm sometimes thinking I don't really know what I want either. And I might really like this today, and I might like something else tomorrow. And so, we're not asking you to know all the answers, but we are asking you in this moment in your life, what is something that, excites you, and and so you don't need to have the answers to all the questions in life right now. So want to just reassure you. And part of the research is just trying to figure out what options might be, right? And so I put some of the links up here in the chat. So if you don't have the chat box open, go ahead and open the chat and make sure you see it. Some people have asked specifically about personal insight questions. So I put the UC, University of California personal insight questions link there. But also UC San Diego's visit page has a lot of resources for you to understand them specifically. And then USC, Maria shared some of these links. Sometimes it's great. These sessions are great because you get to talk to, you get to hear from admissions officers themselves, but sometimes hearing from a student is probably even better because you know exactly how they're feeling as a student. And so lots of social media, you all have like a lot of great opportunities right now to get to know schools in a way that that even if you're not able to go visit the campus, you're still able to get that feeling in different ways. So definitely do follow this. There will be a recording of this session. So just check back on our Tuesday Talks page if you are looking for that. And again, you can get to know these schools better. They didn't even get a chance to really tell you about their institutions today. So if you want to, you should go to their visits. You should go to their info sessions and you should ask questions because they will connect you with the people and give you that feeling of what it's like to be on their campuses. So once again, thank you so much for joining us for Tuesday Talks. John and Maria, a huge amount of thanks again for waking up super early after a holiday, no less. So I really appreciate you waking up early in the morning and spending time with us. And I really appreciate you students and counselors who are on summer vacation and still logging on for this conversation. We love doing this and we will have another one next week. So I know more people will be on summer, but if you still want to hear, we're going to talk about summer next week. We're going to have 3 institutions from upstate New York. They're going to talk about upstate New York a little bit, but mostly they're going to say, how should you make the most of your summer? And I know a lot of you have had questions about that. So tune in next week for that. In the meantime, I'm going to let Maria and John go and maybe take a little nap before they have to go back to work or get started on their day. I'm going to hang around for a little longer. If people want specific questions about interviews and initial view, a lot of the questions that you need to ask yourself about for supplements are the same questions that you need to ask yourself when you're thinking about interviews. So if you are still kind of wanting to hang on, I'm going to be here for another 20 minutes. So, but everybody else, have a good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.
Thank you, Gloria.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Maria. All right. So for those of you who are hanging on, I'm here to answer questions about initial view. And I know some of you know tons about initial view. Some of you don't know anything about initial view. So if already know stuff about it, and others, you know, if you want me to start over, I'm happy to start over as well. Let me get a screen up for, and I'm sorry. All right, great. There are already questions, so I'm going to just go ahead and dive in. And can you all hear me? I'm getting a message here that my connection isn't strong. Are you all there? Oh no, what is happening? All right, can you all see my screen? Okay, wonderful. Okay. Fantastic. Okay, so thank you for hanging on. And real quick, what is Initial View? Initial View, we're a video platform, an interview platform where we interview you, you talk with us, our interviewers, for about 15 minutes or so. And then there's a writing sample, 20 minutes, open-ended prompt, no right or wrong answer. And then all of this gets sent to whatever schools you want to send it to. And that's basically it. Somebody here is asking, the interview will be over by June 30th, and that's not true. If you're signing up for a junior interview and somebody just asked about a mock interview, I'll talk about that in 1 second, but let's start with how to prepare, because I think people want to know how to prepare. And I just am going to show you real quickly what it looks like in the admissions officer's platform, because I think a lot of people are like, do admissions officers watch this? And is it helpful? We are integrated with one of the most popular admissions reading software, which means that your interview just sits inside a file. Now, whether or not it's watched in its entirety, it depends. It depends, just like everything else depends. It depends on the type of institution. It depends on if it's a first reader, a second reader, a committee. It depends on a lot of things. It could be listened for 30 seconds. It could be listened to a full 15 minutes. It all depends, because at the end of the day, you are not just one thing. You are a bunch of things. And yes, the transcript is important. Yes, your extracurricular activities are important. Yes, the essays are important. We spend all this time talking about essays. As you heard from admissions officers, they're trying to hear who you are. They're just trying to imagine who you are, and is their school a right fit for you? And so interview is a great place to kind of tie everything together. And even now, standardized test scores, they are on some level for some schools still important, for some other schools not as important. So the puzzle changes. And remember that the puzzle is not always the same size. Even though I have same size puzzle pieces, your puzzle pieces are all going to look different, but they still show this big picture, and your interview is kind of that piece that pulls it together. And so regardless of whether or not a school is watching it, I think it's the wrong question. Of course, the school will not watch it if you don't send it. That's the wrong question. The question is, what do I need to tell admissions officers? And so when you think about how do I prepare for an interview, you're basically like, what does an admission officer need to know about me? Which means that you need to ask yourself questions. So remember when we talked about the values exercise for essays? I want you to use that same values exercise to think about the interview. You basically are asking yourself, okay, what's important to me? What is important to me? And then the best way to do it, to prepare, I'm going to stop share for a second, is I want you to think about you being the interviewer. I have done this conversation so many times. And when I finally come up with the best way to prepare is to be an interviewer. You basically find a friend of yours and you start asking them questions. Because when you start asking them questions, you realize oh, I want to know more about that. I want to know more about that. And that makes me want to ask a follow-up question. Or it makes you realize that's not interesting. And then okay, when I answer a question like that, that's not interesting. So I don't need to talk about that. So I'll give you an example. In initial view, we're real interviewers. We're not a robot. So if I'm asking you a question, I will for sure have a follow-up question. So for example, let's say I ask you, what's your favorite subject? And then you say, biology. Okay, what do you think my follow-up question is going to be? Don't be shy. What's a good follow-up question? If I say, what's your favorite subject? And you say biology, and then I say, great. Everybody's saying why. Okay, that's an easy follow-up question, right? Why? Okay, so let's say my question to the why was like, because I really like living things. And then, are you going to leave it that way? If you were the interviewer, are you going to leave it that way? What's your favorite subject? Biology. Why? Because I think living things are interesting. What about living things excites you? Great follow-up question. You guys are awesome at interviewers. What is your way to learn it better? What are the risks of taking biology as a major? You guys, you're so good at interviewing already. This is the way to get ready for an interview. You start asking questions to people, and then you start asking follow-up questions, because then you realize, okay, I need to be prepared. So I cannot just have a list of achievements, because if I have a list of achievements, someone's going to ask me a follow-up question and I'm not going to know how to answer that. And if I don't know how to answer that, then I'm not able to show the depth of who I am. So that's a really easy way. You don't even have to have a conversation. Like, you're just typing in the chat right now and you're doing a great job. So maybe start with that, where you literally go on your computer, you type a first tier question. What is your favorite extracurricular activity? And then you yourself start typing, okay, what's my follow-up question to that? What would my follow-up to the follow-up be? Do that a few times with like 3 key things, or maybe 5. Start with 5 key things. A couple academic questions, a couple questions about extracurriculars, a couple questions about relationships, character. Think about like what you think admissions officers should know about you, and then come up with one first tier question and 2 or 3 follow-up questions for each of those questions. That's a really great first way to prepare. The second way to prepare, I would suggest, is actually getting together with a friend. Now, people are asking me about mock interviews. I'm happy to do one. We offer something at Initial View called Junior Interview, and that's something that you should do basically now. We only have about 10 more days left of that. You can do a junior interview. The suggestion why I recommend it is because it's with a stranger. And it's good to talk to a stranger sometimes, because you are awkward with your friends and maybe awkward with your parents and even awkward with your teachers and counselors. So sometimes talking to a stranger is a good way to prepare. And then you can also get used to the technology, make sure that you know how to set up your webcam and your microphone and your earphones, all of that. That's really good practice and good for you to do. Plus, with the junior interview, we actually have somebody on our side, an admissions officer, give you some feedback. That's always really great. But even without the junior interview, which I think is a great thing, start with a friend. I know it might be awkward, but it's okay. Start with a friend and get them to turn on their camera and record. Now, you guys are in this generation that's so great. Like, if I gave this session 5 years ago, we wouldn't be giving this advice. You actually can, on Zoom or on WeChat or Kakao or WhatsApp or whatever platform, there's so many of them now, have a conversation with a friend and just record it. Because when you record it, you're going to see yourself, you're going to hear yourself. I hate seeing myself and hearing myself. In fact, whenever I watch these Tuesday Talk replays, I'm always like, oh, I sound weird and I use too many ums and I make this weird face, and I'm very critical. But it is really good practice, just generally, because you'll realize, oh, I'm not very clear when I talk about this. I I need to really work on thinking about what I'm saying before I say it. You will notice things about yourself the more that you record. So do that. That's the best way to do mock interview. Just get together with somebody and record. Someone's asking me, what are those 3 to 5 questions to prepare? It can be anything. I would say something academic. So definitely ask yourself a question of like, what is my favorite subject, or what is something I want to study in the future, or what is an academic achievement I'm proud of? You know, think about something academic. You definitely want to talk about something academic, because at the end of the day, this school wants to know, are you going to be a successful student? Because you're there to learn. Then an extracurricular. So what is an extracurricular activity that's meaningful to you? How have you spent your time outside of class? Like, these are kind of good questions for you to ask yourself. Character questions are a little harder, because it might not be like, what character trait are you most proud of? It's usually not that kind of question, but admissions officers actually do want to know about your character. So it's more about thinking about inside academics, or inside extracurriculars, or inside something you're doing every day. What is a character trait that's important to you? Now, that could be anything between leadership to generosity, to being a good listener, to being a good teammate, all those things. It could be something like that. So you need to kind of think about where you could insert that piece of information. And so that's a little bit harder, where you can figure out what question to ask, but you guys can think about it. You're very smart. And I think if you take the time to think about, I want to highlight this about myself, what's a good way to go about that? Well, if somebody asks me about my proudest moment, I can talk about this story. Or if someone asks me about a challenge I've had, I can tell about this story. So you basically can think about what you want to say, and then think about 10 possible questions that could get you there. Great. Let's see. What other questions? Some people have some questions here. I'm just gonna make a note here. All right. So there is a question. Can you do this multiple times? You can do initial view as many times as you want, as long as there's 14 days, 2 weeks between each time. So we don't want people to come and do an interview every day. I don't think that's helpful. And in fact, I don't even think doing it more than once is necessarily helpful. I give you that option because I know sometimes you might have a bad day. You might be sick and you're not, you might have broken up with your girlfriend the day before and you feel miserable. Fine. I'm okay with you doing it more than once. But here's my rule. You can do it more than once, but the last time you do it is the interview. You cannot go back and say, no, I did better the last time. I want that one back. You can't. So it's a thoughtful process. It's not like you can send your favorite one to the school. You send your most recent one to the school because that is the most recent representation of who you are. So I would not come back and do it again if you were like, my hair was in my face. That's not a good reason. Earlier, that picture that I showed you of where it sits in the admissions officer's file, a lot of times they're clicking play and they're listening in the background when they go look at the rest of your application. So they're not spending time every minute looking at whether or not your hair is in your face. And even if your hair was in your face, that's not a reason to accept or deny you, right? Like that's not an important piece of the admissions process. So don't come back just because somebody told you your hair was in your face. Do come back if you feel like, oh, I was not myself, or, oh, I was too rehearsed, or, oh, actually I did it early to try to get it out of the way. And now I have this new experience. I had a summer job and it was amazing. And I really want to talk about that. Sure. You can come back and do it again because of that. Biggest mistakes. What are the biggest mistakes? Common mistakes. I would say that a big mistake is being too rehearsed. So I'm telling you guys to think about all these questions ahead of time and writing down answers. That's only for your reflection purposes, and then you should throw away the piece of paper. You should not have the piece of paper next to you during the interview or like in front of you or behind the screen. You should not do that because you will sound like a robot. You will not be normal. You will not be listening carefully to the interviewer. And all of those things are more important than the words that you actually say. When I go back and ask admissions officers like about memorable interviews or memorable things that happen in an interview, they're never what I think they're going to be. And that's because the interview, like I said, one piece of the puzzle together. They're not like just looking at the interview itself. And so I'll give an example. One time I asked an admissions officer to tell me about, hey, give me one memorable interview from the year. And she said, oh, it's this one. And she showed it to me. And she said, specifically this part of the interview. And I listened to that part of the interview, and it was this girl talking about baking. And I remember thinking, really? It's the baking that got you? But then she told me, here's the thing. On her application, she looked like she was like so stellar in so many areas. It almost felt like she was like not reachable. Like she was a little bit too sophisticated, too, whatever. And the baking actually made her feel human. It made her feel like, oh, she's actually a 17-year-old girl. She likes to bake. She talked about how much she liked to bake and how she loved it when her friends would taste the baking and feel so joyful, and how they would have fun together baking. So they talked a lot about, she just talked about being 17 and her relationships with her friends. And it was because it was a piece of the puzzle that was missing on the application. That is what made it memorable to the admissions officer. So I don't want you to like get fixated on like focusing on these like amazing achievements that you're not showing your human side. And so more important than just like knowing the answers is how you go about it. So throw away that piece of paper. Another big mistake that happens is you're taking too much time explaining something that doesn't matter. So another example, lots of students do Model UN, okay? So this comes up in interviews a lot. There are some people who feel like they need to explain all of Model UN, and there's not that much time. You don't need to be like, okay, the Model UN works like this. It's like, it's like you have this conference. You don't need to go through all those details because one, most admissions officers know. All admissions officers know what MUN is, but it might look a little different at your school. So you do want to kind of like highlight something specific about the school, but how it impacts you. Because at the end of the day, they don't really care that you did Model UN. They cared about what you learned and how it impacts you. So you don't need to go into all the details of how Model UN works. Go straight to the part that matters to you, which is when I first joined MUN, I didn't know anything about global issues, and I felt really stupid. You can say that. And very quickly, a friend came alongside me and taught me a lot of things and made me feel like it doesn't matter that I don't know. And then And now now I've grown so much and I really want to study international relations because I now have this new understanding about global issues. Like how it impacted you is much more important than what Model UN is and all the details attached to the competition, the conference, the debates. So I hope those examples are helpful to you. These are only 2 examples of like thousands. Your story does not need to sound like anybody else's, and it should not sound like anybody else's. Don't get hung up on the details, but just think about your why and your how. That is much more important than your what, which is an easier thing to ask. Like, what is important to admissions officers? They don't really care about what it is. They want to know why and how. So focus on that and think about that. All right. I am at my 20 minutes. I love to talk about initial view if you cannot tell. So if you're like, hey, I need my students and parents to know about this, please email me and I will put together an info session for your families. Like we can talk about this for an hour instead of just 20 minutes, and I can give more examples. I can talk about more nuts and bolts on how to sign up and all of that stuff. We didn't even go through that today, but email me. And if you don't know my email, I'm typing it in the chat right now. You can email me there. And if, I cannot do an info session for one person, but I can do an info session for 10. So if you have 10 or more, and if you're from a school, it's for your school, great. If you're just a student right now and you're like, I have 10 friends, I'm okay with that. If you can promise me 10 friends, I'll get together an info session for you. So email me and I'll answer questions. Any other last minute questions before I close our talk today? I see someone raising their hand. Yes, here, let me share my screen. Somebody's still asking about the June 30th. Okay, so we do have this thing called junior interview. The deadline for that is June 30th because I won't have admissions officers able to give feedback after that. And after June 30th, particularly if you're a junior, you'll want to start getting ready for your real interview. So if you go to initialview.com/booking, and then you just look for junior interview, you can still book that. You just have 9 more days to book that. And then we're closing that out for the cycle, and then we'll reopen it again in the spring. But if you are feeling ready, you're a rising senior, I would go ahead and book. You can book your time earlier. You don't have to do it right this second, but you can book your time. For example, like you're like, I'll be ready in August. Then go ahead and get on our calendar. We already have August times available. You can just book the time. That way you have it on your calendar and you have something to work toward. And if you cannot find a time that works for your schedule, email me. I have never said no to a student. We have always been able to fit somebody in. And yeah. So, well, we thank you so much for spending time with us here. If you missed part of this talk, it should be on our YouTube channel already. And we also will have a recording on our own Tuesday Talks page. There you go. All righty. Thank you so much for spending time with us this afternoon and evening. So good to see you all. And I'll see you next week. Next week, we're going to talk about, remember, summer. And I'm sure all of you are like, what should I do this summer? And hopefully they'll give us some good advice. And if you have questions that you want to make sure that I ask them ahead of time, feel free to email me as well. Okay, have a good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are, and see you next week. Bye.